The Romans were more concerned with the power dynamics that occurred during the act of sexual activity itself as opposed to caring about who was having sex. They perceived this as putting the male in a position of power since the woman was submitting to the man in a heterosexual relationship in which the man takes on the role of the giver and the woman takes on the role of the receiver. The ancient Romans did not have the same ideas about what sex and sexuality meant as we do now. They were unable to classify the individual as either homo, bi, or heterosexual. One of the most common and socially acceptable types of sexual partnerships between two males is one in which the adult man, who is referred to as the Aristes, has a sexual relationship with a young boy, who is referred to as the Eromenus. They had never experienced an age gap of this magnitude before. Thus, this relationship served not only as a sexual connection, but also as a form of mentoring. In today's society, it was not only usual but nearly expected for husbands to have affairs outside of their marriages. Even though it was highly popular for men to have extramarital affairs with other men, these encounters were often with women. However, it was quite common for males to have extramarital affairs. In order for us to have a complete understanding of this situation, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of Roman concubines. The institution of concubinage was widespread in ancient Rome. The attractiveness, charisma, and brains of male concubines were highly prized qualities. They frequently came from slave markets, but some of them came from freeborn families who voluntarily chose this way of life for themselves and their children. These males held a singular role in Roman culture, acting not only as companions but also as sexual partners for other members of their community. The life of a male concubine consisted not only of satisfying the whims of their patrons, but also of developing meaningful connections with those patrons. They were expected to have a strong background in a variety of artistic disciplines, as well as literature and music. Male concubines frequently went through rigorous training in order to entertain and engage their patrons. As a result, male concubines were an essential component of the upper-class Roman society. They went with their clients to public events, social gatherings, and even military campaigns. Some of them even rose to high positions in the Roman bureaucracy, where they used the influence and authority gained from their personal relationships to advance their careers. Now let's go on to the most interesting portion. During the time of the Roman Empire, male concubines were privy to a wide range of absolutely astonishing activities. The historical records do give us some insights into their world, even though we may not have specific details of every meeting that they had. These encounters included everything from opulent feasts and celebrations to more personal get-togethers held in secluded quarters. For the enjoyment of their guests, the male concubines would frequently engage in sexually suggestive dances, perform musical acts, and recite poetry. These celebrations were ostentatious demonstrations of riches and power, and they were occasions in which the bounds of pleasure and decadence were tested to their absolute limits. Now let's concentrate on Emperor Hadrian and Antinous, the man he cherished more than life itself. Their connection exemplifies to perfection the special bond that exists between an emperor and the male concubine he chooses to marry. Hadrian, the Emperor of Rome, is considered to be one of the most renowned examples of a Roman emperor who had male lovers during his reign. Not only was he famous for his architectural legacy, which included the beautiful Hadrian's Wall, but also for his passionate relationships with young men, especially his lover Antinous. The story of Hadrian will become entangled with the intriguing lives of male concubines who lived during the time of the Roman Empire. Because of the profound emotional connection that existed between Hadrian and Antinous, their love has been memorialized in art in the form of sculptures, paintings, and poems. Antinous rose to prominence in Hadrian's life, becoming his traveling companion and eventually becoming a notable figure in his own right. When Antinous passed away under unknown circumstances, their life took a terrible turn, which is unfortunate. Hadrian was left in utter disbelief, and in order to pay tribute to the man he loved so dearly, he commissioned the building of a number of monuments and created a cult in Antinous's honor. It was sort of a form of birth control for a man to sleep with someone other than his wife at the very least. It was a way for a man to enjoy himself without putting his spouse at risk of death in cases of homosexual relationships. It would have been expected for the emperor or whoever had the higher position to take the role of the giver, which was seen as the more powerful and masculine role. However, this wasn't always the case, and it always confused the Roman public when they chose to take on the submissive in what they saw as feminine roles. In spite of the fact that Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in the world at the time, he always looked forward to being on the receiving end of his relationships with other men. This is made clear by the fact that he's a good example. The most confusing thing for the people who lived in Rome was why, given that he was the one who turned Rome into an empire and held the most authority there, he wouldn't also want to govern the bedroom. After all, he was the one who established Rome as an empire. Although there is evidence that Emperor Hadrian had female lovers, it appears that he had absolutely no interest in women. Even though he was legally married to a lady for political reasons, the majority of historians are of the opinion that the couple did not even consummate their marriage. This is one of the reasons why they are of this opinion. Emperor Hadrian was one of the few who only slept with males, beginning in the year 117 CE. Other emperors were known to have had lovers of both sexes. After spending a significant amount of time together, tragedy befell the pair while they were vacationing in Egypt. The young kid was lost in the Nile, and it is unknown what caused his death. Hadrian established a city at the location of the murder and named it for the woman who had been his sweetheart. Following that, he carried the mummified body of the youngster back with him. That was a stunning young man by the name of Antonius, and he was above the rest. He was careful to see that the youngster received an education that was up to standard. Nero was no exception to this, and found at least 2 of his male lovers and his slaves, unlike other emperors. Though Nero forced the men to participate in bizarre wedding ceremonies. One of these men was a free slave named Pythagoras. In this instant, Pythagoras was the groom, and Nero was the bride. And all this, of course, was one of the instances where the public was confused by the emperor's behavior. He was the ruler, the one with the power, so shouldn't he have played the masculine role? That wasn't the only time that Nero married a man. A few years later, he married another slave boy named Spores. This time, Nero made his people happy by fitting the masculine role they expected him to take. However, his actions here are much worse sounding to our modern sensibilities, to make sure that the people knew that Nero was fitting into the powerful masculine role. Tiberius was one of the worst offenders for mistreatment of his lovers. He's a prime example of an older man who liked to sleep with younger boys. Tiberius spent the majority of his time in private villas on islands in the Mediterranean. He had young boys brought to the islands to be his household servants and also to satisfy his sexual desires. It wasn't just sex that he would demand from his young concubines, though there were a number of gross things that he would have these young boys do. One of the worst things that he did was train particular young boys to swim between his legs while he bathed, and then he had them nib. Tiberius would not only have the youngster sleep in the same bed as him, but he would also make the other children sleep in any number of different groups while he watched and got himself ready to repeat the same deeds. In most cases, the life of a male lover of the emperor was not an easy one. Although there were some advantages, like living in luxurious quarters and having the opportunity to socialize with the most powerful person in the world, the drawbacks significantly exceeded the positives of this situation. In addition, because Roman politics were always changing, a good number of emperors entertained some very reprehensible notions, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them from acting on those impulses. The alluring world of male concubines in Roman society is presented here in its entirety for your perusal. These individuals occupied a special place, acting in a capacity other than that of sexual partners. They were trusted confidants, constant companions, and wellsprings of creativity for the ruling classes of ancient Rome. Thanks for watching. Bye.